Water History, episode 120. No guest, just me, Charlie. Call it the Charlie episode if you want. Last week, I joked that with Richard being out, we did the episode with Alex Hernandez, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that one yet, you can hop off of this and go listen to that one. I'm going to get to that in a second. But I joked, Richard wasn't on that one either. I joked that it was like having a substitute teacher when Richard was out for a day for Model UN or being sick. It was rare. Now it feels like when your teacher gets pregnant and you don't know when they're coming back. That's how I feel right now. So Richard's on a bit of a sabbatical. We're going to have some fun tonight, though. On the Alex Hernandez episode last week, filmed it live in Tampa. When I finished the episode, I felt right away, this is one of our best episodes. Alex was unbelievable. And his story, he brought up some aspects of his journey back to Catholicism that even I had no idea about. And Alex and I are pretty close. And he also told me some other stuff off air that no idea. But that was a special episode. However, as a basketball coach, a piece of advice that they give you is always watch the film. Always watch the film after. And admittedly, I don't listen back to a lot of the Hot Water History episodes, but I listened back to this one because I thought Alex was so great. And I am not going to lie, super disappointed in myself. I thought that I could have been a lot better as a host. I usually don't have an issue with verbal fillers. I could not stop saying, you know, after everything that I would say. So I'm going to try to work on that tonight. Not saying, you know, every time I say, you know, we got to take a drink. Speaking of drink, our sponsor, Tridentine Brewing, their slogan should be, we're getting thirsty, because we are getting thirsty. When these guys go commercial, first of all, and I bring this up every episode, but you guys are used to this, so I don't really care. When these guys go commercial, you all thought that Bud Light woke, anti-woke movement was big. You all have no idea what's coming with Tridentine Brewing. So follow them on Twitter. Trevor's super based. He's awesome. Every family should be like the Alcorns. And I don't like when people say support them because they're not a charity. They make a great product. And I just don't like when people say, oh, support small businesses. I think that's a psyop. I think it frames in our minds that these are the little guys and you're going out of your way for consuming their product or service. I've never been a fan of that. But go follow them on Twitter. And when their beers come out, drink them because they're very good. Went to the White Sox game today. Caught a foul ball. First time ever. The Sox lost. It's funny. The White Sox have probably won, I don't know, my entire life of being a Chicago White Sox fan. I would say their overall winning percentage, just in general, I would guess it's 47%. They've been below 500 team for most of my life with some really good years in there, but for the most part, below 500. I jinxed it today, but they win and I don't have the data on this, but they win 70 to 80% of the games where I'm in attendance, to the point where my friends know about it. Today was not one of those days. The 6-25 White Sox could not figure it out against the Minnesota Twins, who have won 10 straight games now, and 7 of them are against, guess who? The Chicago White Sox. So I don't know if God could save this Chicago White Sox team. I shouldn't say that. God can definitely save them, but not on the field, off the field. This isn't all I was going to talk about. I wasn't just going to talk about personal stuff today, but I also started a business. And let me tell you, 6 weeks in, and I have never worked on anything harder in my life than this. And we talk a lot about freedom on this podcast. There is nothing more freeing than being your own boss. And it is so hard. And not the being your own boss part, but the fact that you're technically not your own boss and you have customers and you have prospects and employees and hopeful future employees and partners. Instead of having one boss, everyone kind of becomes your boss. But even besides that, I could still take a 2-3 hour break to go to the White Sox game and not tell anyone. Pretty cool. God's blessed me these last 6 weeks. So finally got a 2-3 hour break to get in the sun. Been grinding, so it was a nice afternoon just being at the ballpark in the sun. I think we should get into it now. I think that's all of the personal stuff I wanted to talk about beforehand. I think that if you're listening to this on audio only, I would highly recommend video for this one specifically. Probably going to be a shorter episode. It's just, man, that was another thing with doing the Alex episode. We had one mic, so it was a lot of back and forth. I'm really not a big talker. And what I mean by that is I'm definitely extroverted, but these long soliloquies, I have a very difficult time with. Anyone that knows me in person, whenever I'm going on a tangent, it's usually something that I'm really passionate about, or it's about my business, which I am very passionate about. So that fits in that category. But I don't know how these radio guys do it every day with these constant 15-minute segments. I think it's very challenging and a reason that they get paid the big bucks. So definitely something that I've tried to work on. And this podcast has been great because it's helped me with my own public speaking as well, which is another reason why more people should start podcasts for that alone. But let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. We've got 2 things that I'm extremely passionate about. And it fits together with the things that Richard and I talk about every week, but it's a little, I don't know, more on the edgy side, more conspiratorial, I guess you would say. But I think these views are becoming a lot more mainstream. The first thing I want to talk about, I love talking about this. The first thing I'm going to talk about, I'm about to make a statement that I know for a fact to be 100% true. However, if I say it out loud to the majority of people, there's something internal that feels like I'm lying. I don't want to say this to other people. It's not fun. It's impossible to say this out loud without having a couple thoughts of, am I the crazy one here? With that being said, 100%. And the statement is that the government is manipulating the weather. Even just there, I got it. And we're going to go through it in a minute here. The government is manipulating the weather. Hopefully, you're on video. I think this is going to be a much better episode for those that are on video. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I have some other things to share. Chemtrails. It's been something that has always been a little bit on my radar, but I've never looked too deep into it. I would say that my conspiracy career kicked off in, what was it? I was a sophomore in high school, 2016, 2017, which was the best time to be a conspiracy theorist because it was before so much of the YouTube censorship. And I really did feel like that was an enlightenment period for a lot of people. Chemtrails was always on the radar a little bit. I was more interested in other conspiracies, and I shouldn't even call it a conspiracy. It's unfair. So many of these conspiracies just have been accepted as true by so many more people that I don't even know what to call them anymore. I should just say inconvenient truths, I think. 9/11 was an inside job that we knew, that our government knew about. And at the very least, our government was fully aware of. Parts of our government were fully aware of. And you can even get more nefarious than that. That's considered, or at least was considered, a conspiracy theory. And I would argue that in the last 7, 8 years since I was a sophomore in high school, when a lot of these views really took more balls to say, we should not use the conspiracy word for much anymore. That it's been so watered down, and so many of these inconvenient truths that have been thrown in this conspiracy category are accepted by a lot more people. And Richard and I talked about this before on an episode. We talked about how a lot of beliefs are actually subconscious, and people's opinions, and you'll see this, you could just see this in men and women. Men have significantly more unpopular opinions than women. And a big part of that is I would argue, the difference in physical strength and the possibility that, hey, if someone disagrees with you, this could get physical, and you might as well not be the guy that stands out or wants people, coming at you. I think that's another reason why Catholicism is so important, because to believe all of these things, you have to have some detachment from the earthly life, or you can be the strongest guy in the room and no one challenges what you have to say. Unfortunately, in a lot of rooms, I'm not the strongest guy in the room, but I do think that the more Catholic I've become, the less afraid I've been to share and be more open about a lot of the takes or opinions or conspiracies that I've probably believed since I was a sophomore in high school. So, without further ado, chemtrails. This is a video in Chicago. I want everyone to take a look at this. I remember being a kid and looking up at clouds and being able to say, hey, that cloud looks like a dog. That cloud looks like an elephant. That cloud kind of looks like fill in the blank. Now, these are the clouds that we get. Just two direct lines filled with the way I would describe it is we went from thick, what's the word? We went from thick clouds with some real character to them. And now we just have these. And they expect us not to think that something's going on. It's either direct lines or it's bed sheets. That's probably the best way I would describe it. A lot of these clouds off to the side just look like bed sheets. I don't even know if you would call them clouds. It looks like just one sheet, how I would describe it. Some more people from Twitter. This Twitter, they're all over this. I mean, here's this. Just, it looks like the Northern Lights a little bit during the day. And that is just nothing. I should also mention, I'm going to start following this a little more closely because even I've been kind of slacking on this. After that video that I just showed in Chicago, it was cloudy for the next 2 days. And that's another thing I want to bring up. They've robbed us from those days where it's cloudy and the sun is out, and then the sun is covered by a cloud and it's shady for a little bit, and it's sunny again and it's cloudy again. There used to be a lot more of that crossover when I was a kid. And now it's either the sun's out or it's gray. That's what it's been like in Chicago. And we can come up with a lot of ways. Charlie, why would the government want to modify the weather? First of all, if they can modify the weather, they can modify and control anything in our lives. And this stuff really grinds my gears. Obviously, it's no secret how much I can't stand these people. But there's something so deeply demonic about them playing God. It feels different about, you've got money that they steal, the wars, that's all demonic as well. But there's something that, for whatever reason, when they mess with nature and they mess with God, or they play God, I shouldn't say they mess with God, they play God. I don't like that one bit. And here's some more. Let's just go through some more pictures. Sheet. Let's check this out. I don't know if it's worse in other countries or states or cities. I don't even know how much or what distance of land that they can modify. But these are just lines, sheet. Seriously, I haven't seen a cloud that looks like anything all spring. It's all just like a Google or a Microsoft Paint fill. That's how it feels. And to go back to my original point, why does it still feel so weird to admit the inconvenient truth that the government is manipulating the weather? That that's where we're at, though, is that these people that control so many parts of our lives are controlling whether it's going to be sunny or rainy out. And the reason why they control the weather, besides them also being able to control everything else, the climate change narrative writes itself. They're going to be able to manipulate the weather, the climate in any way that they seem fit. And they're also going to be able to change, and this is already happening, they're also going to be able to change whether it's a good crop season or not. Are we going to have a good harvest this year, or was there not enough rain? Was there not enough sunlight? Something deeply troubling about taking that out of God's hands. Let's go to the next one. The next one, I'll stop sharing my screen for a little bit. The next one kind of falls in this same category. It has a little bit less to do about the sun, or I gave it away. It has a little less to do with the clouds, but it also has to do with the sky, and it has to do with the sun. I get a lot of shit for this take, and even from people who are based and semi-based, which is weird. The second take, hot take. Sunscreen is a scam. I'm not as sold on this one as I am with chemtrails, but I'm pretty sure on this one. I want to pull up this article. First of all, I just made a big blanket statement. I should actually explain myself a little bit more. So I used to wear sunscreen my whole life. Growing up, it's what you did. Charlie, you're going to get burned. Charlie, you're going to get, the typical listen to mom, put it on before you go swimming. And for the last, I don't know, 4 years, I haven't been wearing any sunscreen. And I am much tanner. I got a little sunscreen. I was in Florida. I got a little sunburnt. I was in Florida. I'll admit. I got some color here. You'll see this. We'll get to that in a little bit. I am definitely more tanner, though. I was very fair, much more fair skinned than I am now. And overall, I'm definitely a lot healthier. And the reason why I think sunscreen is a scam, I'll tell you where I think a lot of issues with the sun come from. So I believe that the sun and building up tolerance to the sun is similar to working out, right? If I'm in school indoors for 8 hours a day in the Chicago winters, and then I go on spring break to Cancun, and I'm out in the sun for 3 days with my shirt off. Bad news. Gonna get fried. Gonna get cooked. I believe that people don't spend nearly enough time in the sun to build up the tolerance, because especially during COVID, we learned about so many of the benefits of, at least some of us did. Some of us learned the benefits of vitamin D. And the problem with sunscreen, modern sunscreens, is it blocks the body's ability to produce it at its most efficient level. So this is another reason why I don't wear shades. Because when I go outside and it's sunny, even just my pupils getting smaller is a message to the rest, to my brain, to the rest of the body that, okay, we're in the sun now. What do we have to start doing? The same thing happens with the sun. I also thinks it gets a little more nefarious. And I'm not going to go down this route right now. Actually, I am in a little bit, but there's also just a ton of fear mongering around the there's so much fear mongering around the skin cancer space. I'm pretty sure skin cancer is the most common form of cancer that you can have. And that makes sense. Your skin covers everything. So for it to be, it's the first layer of protection for the rest of your body. So for anyone to develop skin cancer, it's probably more common than most cancers. I read somewhere that it's the most common cancer, but I didn't really check. I know that most skin cancers are treatable, and I don't think that you're going to die. If you get skin cancer and die, I don't think it was the sun that killed you. Hot take. I don't think God created the sun to punish all of us. And you could just, this is just anecdotal, but your mood when you go out in the sun, there's a reason why people call it seasonal depression, because the sun's not there. We crave the sun. And when's the last time you went to a doctor's office or saw online from some doctor, hey, are you getting enough sunlight? Let me pull this article up. This is another problem. This is from July 2021. Sunscreen from CNN. Sunscreen recall, what the finding of a cancer-causing chemical means for you. The burning heat of summer has us all reaching for sunscreens. But before you slather that product on your skin, first check to see if it is part of a voluntary recall by sunscreen brands Neutrogena and Aveeno. The companies recently pulled several sunscreens from market shelves after independent testing had found they were contaminated with a cancer-causing chemical called benzene. Exposure to benzene increases the risk of developing leukemia and other blood disorders, according to the National Cancer Institute. CVS Health also stopped selling 2 of its after sun care products due to similar findings, but other sunscreens and after sun cosmetics, which also tested positive for the toxin, remain on the market. The vast majority of tested sunscreens, however, were free of benzene, and experts stress the importance of sunscreen use to protect skin from the aging and cancerous effects of the sun. Quote, and this is from, let me just read who this is from before I read the quote. Dermatologist Dr. Ranella Hirsch, a past president of the American Society of Cosmetic Dermatology and Aesthetic Surgery. By the way, look up dermatologist salaries. Dermatologists make bank. And I was doing more research on this before I wanted to talk super publicly about it. Unfortunately, and I'm trying to find this to put in the show notes, but one of the sources that I wanted to cite was deleted from X for whatever reason. Post was deleted. So I'm going to try to find that, but it dug up basically a lot of how big dermatology works. Anyways, this is the quote. It is not a reason to stop using sun protection, which is known to prevent skin cancer. To do so would be like hearing a particular car model was recalled and then committing to never drive again. Okay. And this is a great quote. How did brand name sunscreens become contaminated with benzene? Should you be more concerned? Should you be concerned? And what can you do to protect yourself and your family? We've gathered answers to these questions and more. Let me get to the quote that I really want you to read because then we get into it. I also think that when you wear sunscreen, it removes you from the social responsibility of all of the other reasons why you got sunburned. Let's take reasons why you would be sunburnt sunscreen, besides not besides refusing to put sunscreen on. Lack of hydration. That's a big one. If you're not drinking enough water, you're probably going to get burnt if you're out in the sun. I mentioned this earlier, not spending enough time in the sun to build up that resistance. Tan people don't get burned. Okay. I know a ton of tan people, especially people, other cultures, they're not throwing on sunscreen. They don't need to. Number three, and this is a big one, your diet. Because so much, in my opinion, of the reason why people get sunburnt is just how poisonous the normal American diet is and how full it of just vegetable oils and these polyunsaturated fats that just have a really tough time being broken down within our body. And those really don't mix well with the sun, by the way. I should have done more research on that before. Let's talk about this. Which sunscreens were recalled? All batches or lots of these 4 Neutrogena spray sunscreens and 1 Aveeno spray were voluntarily recalled this week by parent company Johnson and Johnson. Quote, out of an abundance of caution. Where else within the last 3 years did you hear about a product that Johnson and Johnson put out that was also recalled? Skipping to another article. What to know if you recently had the Johnson and Johnson vaccine or have an appointment to get it. This is April 13th, 2021. So 2 months before that other article. I want to skip down to this quote. We are recommending a pause in the use of this vaccine out of an abundance of caution. Dr. Peter Marks, director of the FDA Center of Biologics Evaluation and Research, and Dr. Ann Shushat, principal deputy director of the CDC, said in a joint statement, right now, these adverse events appear to be extremely rare. Well, guess what? Doesn't seem so rare 3 years later. How crazy is that? The similarities between the COVID vaccine and sunscreen. There's not just how do I want to say this? It's not just marketed to people the same way. It's not just using the same fear-mongering sort of tactics to get people to buy into it. These are the same company that are both producing this. Johnson & Johnson, a huge leader in the sunscreen space. They were a huge leader in the vaccine space. Maybe I don't want that stuff within my own body, but that's just me. We can read a little bit more. Once I saw that quote, to be honest, I was pretty blown away. So I guess the bottom line is that I don't trust these people at all. And I believe in my body's natural functions. And I think more people should take greater responsibility for their health. And I think that a lot more people should be more unafraid about the social consequences, because we've reached a point. This was already true. This was already true financially with so much of the college stuff, and putting the way that colleges are putting people in generational debt is disgusting. So what I'm about to say has always been true economically, but it's also becoming true with our health as well. But listening and trying to keep up with the Joneses, before it just made you poor. Now it makes you poor and sick. So I think people need to be braver. It is difficult to admit that we live in a world where if you act in the same exact way as, call it, I don't even know if you would say the middle, those with the middle 60 percentiles of opinions is how I would say it. The people that don't have that many hot takes, but they've got takes. If you listen to those people blindly, we're at a point now where we can't trust anything mainstream. We're in a post-trust society. I don't even know what do we do? I don't even know what we do about that. But I'll tell you what I've done as my solution. My solution is I know who to not trust now. And one of the great parts about COVID, this is true personally, and this is true not personally, you really found out who you could trust. The chips were down, and now you know. So I would keep that in mind. Now we're going to get to the people's favorite segment. Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
I'll share my screen again. First article. Ceasefire supporters urge Oak Park trustees to sign resolution. The group's drafted resolution calls for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Okay, so the war is over because Oak Park, Illinois is drafting a ceasefire resolution. There was the Treaty of Versailles, and there was the Oak Park Wednesday Journal drafted resolution for a ceasefire. A group of community members came back to urge Oak Park's Village Board of Trustees to pass a permanent ceasefire resolution for the Israel-Hamas war. The move on April 30th comes 3 weeks after the group first pressed the trustees to take action during a highly contentious board meeting. That April 9th meeting drew about 20 speakers during the non-agenda public comment to either support or oppose the resolution. Tuesday's meeting was more subdued. 6 people spoke to explain why they are still pushing to get the resolution passed. Daniel Lakemacher, who said he is a United States Navy veteran that worked at Guantanamo Bay, explained that his experiences taught him about dehumanization, horrific treatment, and torture, so he believes that war is not the answer. Quote, I'm not asking you as the village board to negotiate international affairs, he said. But what I am asking you to do is to represent for our local residents and for the wider world what our values are as a community. Dude, Daniel, I don't even know who this guy is. What did you just say? This isn't just Teresa Chapel Magruder talk now. This guy was a tough Navy veteran who worked at Guantanamo Bay. And now he's just hitting us with the Vicky Skaman type non-sentence here. Karen Van Slyke, a founder and chair of the Committee for a Just Peace in Palestine, Israel, circulated an online petition supporting the resolution. The resolution calls for, quote, an immediate permanent ceasefire, the provision of immediate and unconditional life-saving humanitarian aid in Gaza, and the release of all hostages. As of May 1st, 524 people signed it, but the group is trying to collect as many signatures as possible, Van Slyke said. Okay. This is a problem I have with a lot of these stories, is that in business, we talk a lot about you can work hard, but if you're working on the wrong things, you're not going anywhere. These people, they do all of these things that don't do anything, but they think they're going somewhere. That's why I actually had a little respect for the people taking in the migrants at St. Edmunds or another church shelter and taking care of those people. Because that actually takes some work. But the people in Israel don't know who you are. As of May 1st, 524 people signed it. Do you think that if 52,000 people signed it, anything would be different? Anyways, resolution supporters held discussions with village trustees ahead of the April 30th meeting. Van Slyke told Wednesday Journal, supporters have met with each trustee at least once, she said, and several more than once. The trustee's biggest question, she said, has been why it is appropriate for Oak Park to pass this type of resolution. As some residents who have opposed it pointed out, the issue is international, not local. Quote, it's appropriate for them, the board, to pass it because our community is being impacted, Van Slyke explained. It's not just any one of dozens of humanitarian crises in the world right now. Village President Vicky Skaman said the board will continue to stay in dialogue with the community and, quote, work together what is possible. The board members did not elaborate at the meeting on whether they would entertain a resolution on the agenda. The resolution supporters have also tried to emphasize that they're an inclusive group, Van Slyke said. Members of the Jewish and Palestinian community are in support of the resolution, she said, as well as individuals of other faiths and all ages. Give me 1 second. I got to check something. Okay. Quote, the crisis is accelerating with every passing day, she said. This quote, there is an unparalleled humanitarian crisis going on. How am I forgetting this? Oh my gosh. What was the word that they used during COVID? Unprecedented. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That took way too long. Okay, so unparalleled is the new unprecedented. There is an unparalleled humanitarian crisis going on. Okay, so that's just a word that we're going to throw in there as an adjective to just draw up more urgency. That's essentially what it is. Jim Madigan, a former deputy director of the Oak Park Public Library, spoke during the April 30th meeting to express support for the resolution and to ask board members to use their voices to amplify those asking for a ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and the release of hostages. Quote, my generation seems to have lost their idealism and settled for the lesser of two evils, Madigan said. Today's youth rejects that compromise. Jenna Leving Jacobson, who said she's Jewish, said Jews and Palestinians are not on opposite sides of this issue and that many Jewish people do support a ceasefire. Quote, it is not enough for only Jews to know freedom, she said. If we fight only for our own rights and safety, but do not rise up for those in need alongside us, it is not enough. The village board, she said, may not want to offend Jewish people, but Jacobson said she has not seen the same concern for Palestinian residents. Okay, so this is a bit honorable here. Quote, do not equate supporting Israel with supporting Jews, Jacobson said. There is no neutral position. Our silence is complicity and will only encourage continued suffering. Okay, so she had me up until saying that silence is complicity. So that's a dumb take. But other community members are still against the resolution. At the April 9th meeting, several other Jewish individuals expressed an opposition to the board passing a ceasefire resolution and their desire to not alienate local Jewish residents. This is insane. Quote, the resolution initially seems to check all of the boxes for acceptable wording, but it has many problems, Judith Alexander said at the April 9th meeting. Oak Park's Jewish population feels frightened and alone. Dude, frightened and alone? In Oak Park, Illinois. Let me tell you about frightened and alone. There's some 21-year-old Israeli soldier who had a shit childhood. And now he's on the front lines of an actual fucking war. That's frightened and alone. And a war that he might not even want to be in. Right? He might have just signed up for the military for the same reason most people sign up for the military. Frightened and alone in Oak Park, Illinois. Alexander also wrote a letter to the editor in the Wednesday Journal explaining what she believes to be problems with the permanent ceasefire resolution. In response, Van Slyke said resolution supporters have met with and reached out to those against it to have an amicable exchange of views. Some have questioned why CJPIP, I don't know what that is, and others, I think that's the name of the ceasefire, and others in support of the resolution. Oh, sorry, that's the CJPIP. They shortened the Jewish, Israel, Palestine. I forgot what the full acronym was. Oak Park's amazing at acronyms too. And others in support of the resolution have not taken the issue up with federal officials. Van Slyke said they have for about 6 months. But she also said elected representatives, including the local village board, can amplify their residents' voices to those officials. Quote, If Oak Park joins with the other communities in Illinois and these representatives start hearing that the elected officials closest to the grassroots are saying, quote, you should do this, it's going to have an additional critical impact. And I got news for you. No, it won't. We handle a lot of these stories in Oak Park, and 120 episodes in, something that I'm really starting to understand is I'm just going to pull it up. Let me. There's a verse from the Bible, Matthew 6, verse 3 and 4. But when you give alms, so give to the poor. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your almsgiving may be in secret, and your Father, who sees in secret, will repay you. These people give with their right hand, and they share their right hand with the entire world. And the gap between the impact that they think they're having or the impact or what they think their impact can be, and the gap between that and what their impact actually is so large. There is such a disconnect between true bravery and virtue signaling. This town is great at virtue signaling. Maybe they're doing, I'm sure there's people in Oak Park that do great charitable work. These types of stories show me those who aren't doing great charitable work, but who think they are. Last one, and then we'll wrap it up. Oak Park Public Health Department celebrates 75th anniversary. Some parts of the department have existed for 119 years. Oak Park's Public Health Department has been a state certified local health department for 75 years, but facets of the robust department residents know now existed long before. Okay, but facets of the robust department residents know now existed long before then too. It's unusual for municipalities' public health department to have this state certification, and only a handful do, according to village officials. Some requirements of state certification include having an environmental health supervisor, creating an emergency preparedness plan, ensuring the director meets certain qualifications, and implementing a board of health, said Teresa Chappell, Oak Park's public health director. Oak Park has high standards, said Frank Lipo, executive director of the Historical Society of Oak Park and River Forest. The quote, world's largest village, as it was known for part of the 20th century, has diverse citizens with a variety of public health needs. It's okay. This is a weird quote, but I'm going to try to say it anyways. It seemed like, come on, we're really, today we'd say a progressive community. We're a real cutting edge type community, Lipo said. And we don't have a full-time health commissioner. We don't have as much professional expertise in some of these areas. So Oak Park decided to change that. And this is before certification. The language they use to describe the Oak Park public health director, and we've made not public health director, public health department. And Richard and I have made this comparison probably hundreds of times now. What I'm about to read is the stuff of a church. St. Mary of Perpetual Help being consecrated in 1882, and that whole story is exactly the same type of rhetoric that I'm about to read. In 1905, Frank Needham was the first to lead the Oak Park Public Health Department, which was established by a village ordinance. In 1907, the department dealt with one of its first serious health crises, which was likely scarlet fever, Lipo said. Quote, the alarming speed of contagious disease throughout the community during the week prompted the Board of Education, on the recommendation of the Board of Health, to close the high-end grade schools on Friday morning for an indefinite period, Lipo read from a 1907 Oak Leaves article. In 1913, the Public Health Department dealt with more than 225 cases of measles and nearly 100 of scarlet fever, Lipo said. In the next few years, the department responded to typhoid in 1915, the Spanish flu in 1918, and smallpox in 1920, according to village officials. In the late 1940s, there still weren't as many childhood vaccinations available, Lipo said. And as a result, in 1947, the department dealt with numerous cases of chickenpox, polio, pneumonia, scarlet fever, and whooping cough. When it came to sanitation inspections, the level of requirements needed today were not enforced then. Many inspectors before the department was certified had minimal training and little to no relevant education, Lipo said. Today, health inspectors are required to be highly skilled professionals, Chappell said. They are required to have at least 30 credits in science in their undergraduate program. They must pass state and federal tests to become a licensed health inspector and undergo training for up to a year. Restaurants and other places that serve food in Oak Park are inspected up to 3 times a year based on their risk level, she said. 1949 certification. The growth of the health department was gradual, Lipo said. For the public health department to adopt the structure it has today, it had to add more professional full-time staff with expertise in different aspects of health and maintain or increase its budget. In addition to general improvements, the department had to make some specific improvements too. For example, it had to develop an educational program on ice cream and other frozen desserts. It also had to eliminate duplicated inspections of ice cream and milk. It took a couple years for all the necessary upgrades to be implemented, Lipo said. Okay, this is super boring. Before it was certified in 1949, the Board of Health and other positions in the department were not necessarily paid or were paid little, Lipo said. After certification, more professionals in the department were upgraded to paid positions. Now, the department has 15 full-time positions and 3 contracted part-time ones, Chappell said. 15 people. Oh my goodness. 15 full-time positions in the Oak Park Public Health Department. They better be whipping up some cure for cancer or something. Today's department. The department has several divisions, which include epidemiology, emergency preparedness, environmental health, health education, and nursing, Chappell said. About 40% of the department is funded through general revenue, taxes, and 60% of its funding comes from grants, taxes, Chappell said. Some of the department's newer programs include its opioid overdose prevention project, which includes distribution of Narcan, an opioid blocking life-saving drug, and its work to teach people to lock up guns safely with the intention to prevent shootings and reducing suicide risk. During COVID-19, the health department had to respond quickly along with the rest of the world. But the communicable disease work within the department is more than just COVID-19 response, Chappell said. It responds to this part's so great. It responds to other respiratory viruses like the flu and other diseases such as measles, which is spreading in Chicago. Okay, so they linked this article, and this is an article by CBS. City of Chicago warns of dozens of measles cases, and not all are linked to migrant shelters. So they are, by the way. But Anyways, quote, when there's national public health issues, Oak Park's department adapts to it, Lipo said. It's kind of just constantly evolving. That's a real quote in the Wednesday Journal. It's kind of just constantly evolving. The department has also launched an initiative with the help of its epidemiologists to examine data regarding sexually transmitted infections in Oak Park and target help toward affected populations, Chappell said. Quote, we're really taking the time to look at the data and understand the spread so that we can start to finally see a decline in our STI rates, which have been on the incline for quite some time. The emergency preparedness plans allow Oak Park to be able to respond effectively to dangerous situations. For example, in the event of a community-wide blackout, individuals who use respiratory machines would have an extreme need for electricity, Chappell pointed out. The plan helps ensure the village has a list of those individuals and can inform the necessary electric company who they are, she said. Chappell said one of the initiatives the department is working on in the future includes increasing residents' ability to walk, bike, and run without impediments or barriers. To achieve this, the health department is working with the village to implement Vision Zero, a commitment to eliminating death or injuries from traffic crashes, Chappell said. Okay, so just to get rid of cars. Another new initiative is Safe to Help Illinois, which, if implemented, would allow residents to contact schools anonymously regarding the safety of another community member. This would include concern about that person taking their own life or bringing a gun on school grounds, Chappell said. That's really the goal of public health, is to prevent the spread of disease, to promote good health, and to protect the health of the community, she said. So that's an episode.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Flying solo. I don't think it was too bad. Shout out to everyone who's still listening to this. I don't think I have any announcements. Buy Gary a beer, I guess. It's kind of a freeload move, but if you want to give Rich Ed a handout, I'm sure he'll take a beer. Besides that, I think the white pill. Oh, that's right. Because we always wrap up with this. And How Our History podcast is almost turning into like a children's TV show where you've got the predictable conflict and then the resolution afterwards. The resolution afterwards is, and we say this every episode now, but the resolution afterwards is God and believing in God and staying true to what he wants for us and following his word and following his son. So that's it. That's all I got to say. Shout out to everyone who's still listening. Let me know if you got any questions or thoughts. I actually do love talking about sunscreen and chemtrails, and especially to people that aren't assholes about it too. So peace out, everyone. God bless.